Okay, folks, welcome back to video two on Sub-Saharan African music. All right, so as far as my general information on Sub-Saharan Africa, you don't need to know many details of it. The key feature was that um, in contrast to the big empires that ruled the Middle Eastern region and thus unified things, Africa did not have some massive empire that united it. So there's a lot of regional varieties. But what you do have was one major linguistic ethnic group, the Niger-Congo people, that are widespread throughout West Africa and Central Africa and Southern Africa. Um, so most of our examples, with the exception of the forest people, involve Niger-Congo peoples. Um, and then in some societies that we talked about, there were regional empires, and in others, there was a more decentralized political system. Um, the other things I said that are important to know is that um, in sub-Saharan Africa, south of the Sahara, the first major zone you get to is the Sahel zone. And the Sahel is an arid zone that's not quite the middle of the desert, but it is a very arid zone with nomadic peoples, oftentimes people that use horseback riding, and also a zone where the people are predominantly Muslim. So Islam spread over the centuries through trade routes from North Africa to Sub-Saharan Africa. And so the areas of Sub-Saharan Africa that are closest to the Sahara are predominantly Muslim ethnic groups. And in this lecture, I'm going to first talk about Ghanaian drumming and then talk about Mali. So Mali is our example of Muslim West Africa. The other big things I mentioned was European influence, including slavery starting in the 1400s. And then by the 19th century, the 1800s, Europeans colonized Africa. And that is important because the modern day nation states are by and large the legacy, those boundaries on this political map you see are by and large the legacy of different European colonies. So, for instance, Nigeria and Benin, there are ethnic groups like the Yoruba that are found in Western Nigeria and in Benin. And the political boundary was really just the line between the French colony of Benin and the English colony of Nigeria. Similarly, Ghana was an English colony. Togo was sometimes a German, sometimes a French colony. And many of the colonies in West Africa were French colonies. So French is a very widely spoken language in sub-Saharan Africa. Um, and then there are other important English speaking colonies as well. So oftentimes ethnic groups were divided between boundaries, so the national boundaries. The ramification of that is that modern African nations oftentimes, since there's more than one ethnic group in the nation, in order to appease the various ethnic groups and not create jealousy or a sense that one group controls the country, they oftentimes chose neutral names for their countries that didn't directly relate to one particular ethnic group. And they also oftentimes use the European former colonial language as their primary language. That had various advantages. It was already a written language and being used in colonial times for education. So that just continued. And then it also was a neutral language, not the language of a particular ethnic group. Um, as far as written culture broadly, with the exception of the Sahel Muslim West African countries, where, at least in Mali, Arabic script had spread through Islam. And so Malian Mande languages were written down in Arabic script. But in the more southern areas that we talked about, primarily society until the um, introduction of European languages, societies were primarily oral, not with written languages, and they would transmit their history and culture through oral history. And that was also a big thing in Mali too. So anyway, let's get to our first example, which was Ghana and the Agbekor drumming tradition. Okay, so you'll notice in my notes for the Agbekor, I have a little message to you because these are detailed notes and with a lot of music notation. I did a lot of copying and pasting from the book. The book example is Jeff Chad Titan's book, Worlds of Music, which you get to a more detailed exposition laying out the history and cultural history of Agbekor. We'll briefly talk about that. Um, but my notes are quite detailed for this one, and this was also one of our most musical examples that we'll have all semester. We had you clapping. This was the day that we clapped, and I played the bell, which I'm not going to play on this recording because if I do that, I can change the settings, but we're just going to rely on recordings because last time you couldn't hear the bell. So okay, so let's just look at the notes a little bit. First of all, I said that traditionally the Agbekor was musical practice that, first of all, it's the Ewe people, EWE. The Ewe people are located in eastern Ghana, here around this lake region. Um, Okay, so the Ewe people, and traditionally it was drumming in advance of wars and hunting. So, in order to get excited and get in the zone and also kind of get sensitive and attuned to each other through this highly synchronized musical practice, people would perform this. But then in modern times, for the last century or so, there's been less hunting and um, it's become something of a wedding band type musical practice, except it's specifically for funerals, most commonly, though it could be for other big events as well. So Agbekor ensembles, they'd practice and rehearse, and then they'd be hired to perform, especially at funerals. Funerals are very important in West African tradition. It's seen as important to venerate your ancestors. And so part of that is by venerating your immediate ancestors by having very elaborate funerals and then also subsequent memorial services years on. So after a year, after 5 years, you would have further memorial services. So if someone's very prominent, they could have a big Agbekor ensemble perform, and that's a part of what makes it a huge um, service. Okay, so that's the social context, very simply put. Um, then we got to a lot of musical detail. And I said, as I said in class, I want you to know concepts and focus on concepts more than terms. So for each of these different African examples, there's usually just a couple of terms that I'm going to have you know. So in this case, besides Agbekor itself, the main term is the iron bell, the Gankokui. And that's the double bell that I have in class. Let me quickly get a picture of it. Okay, so there's the gong kokwi. It should be familiar to you. It's the bell that I had in class. It has two different bells attached to it, so you can have a high pitch and a low pitch. And that's generally used so you can accent one of the pitches so you can hear where the pattern begins and ends. So we'll talk about that. But first, let's just look at this video still that I showed you. So here you see the Agbekor ensemble. I'm not requiring you to know the names of the various drums, but you'll see there's one large, long main drum that's the performer hits with one open hand and one with a stick, which is something similar to we learned in is done in Haitian drumming as well. But anyway, we'll stick focus to West Africa here. So this is the main drum, and then there are other various drums. Um, and other than the main drum, the other drums play a complicated set. They play a pattern. It may be complicated or simple, but then it unites with the other instruments' patterns in what we call interlocking parts. So that's the big concept of the Agbekor ensemble, is that it has interlocking parts. Um, and there's a few other key Okay, so the Gonkokwi, Iron Double Bell. So, some key musical features of this. There's a 12 beat meter, and you can hear that 12 beat meter in two different ways, as you can see in the notes. You can hear it, and we did this all in class. So, if you're trying to remember, this is what you clapped, and then I played the bell pattern. So, you did 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. That's one way of subdividing 12. And then the other way is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and that's another way. Then the bell pattern is 7 beats out of that 12. So it always hits on one of the 12 beats. It may not hit on one of the emphasized beats, but it hits on one of the 12 beats and it hits 7 times. That means it's fundamentally uneven and it then is therefore going to be syncopated for some section of it. And usually the bell pattern has two halves to it, one that falls pretty right on the beat, and then one part that is off the beat, especially when you count it in six. So if you count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, some part of it will hit right on those 1, 2, 3, and then some part will be on the ends, hitting off of the main emphasized beat. So I hit the timeline pattern and I'm not going to play that now. What we're going to do, so the rest of these notes here, a lot of this is musical notation that I wouldn't expect you to read, but you can just read some of the um, text around it. So this is how you notate the bell pattern that I played. The asterisk note is the low note. Um, And then you can hear this is in that 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. That's this pattern. And then 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 is this pattern, but both then have the bell pattern on it. But you don't need to know that. You can just, that's just so you can be aware of what that particular notation is. Then we get to this musical example, which is in the files to listen to. So this is in the Jeff Todd Titan book, but you can also just look right at the notes since I've copied and pasted. This would be a good one to listen to. This would be prime for an exam listening example. So you see here it's broken down. The Gankokwe, the bell always plays, and it plays in its timeline. And then we did that, we showed this in class. Then it goes through the bell playing along with a particular other instrument in the ensemble. So you can hear how each ensemble's part sounds and how it relates to the bell playing. And then, starting at 3 minutes and 20 seconds, you get the whole ensemble playing together. So I'll just play a little bit of this. Here's just the bell alone. So there's the bell playing alone. I assume that my voice will be recorded while that's playing, so I can just show you how it fits with both of those subdivisions of 12. So we'll start it playing on the recording. 2, 3, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 3, 4, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 3, 3. That's the subdivision of 4, groups of 3 making 12. And then the other way. 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there you can hear the different meter, the way that the bell pattern itself interacts with the meter, which is what we clapped in class. Then we'll cut ahead at 34 seconds. You hear the bell pattern in relation to the shaker pattern. So I would recommend you go through this musical example in detail and be aware of these different relationships. You don't need to know all the musical details beyond what I've been discussing here, but you should just be able to hear these and realize, okay, this is a bell timeline and then some drum that plays along with it, or a shaker in this case that we're about to hear first. So there's the shaker. It follows pretty closely the bell pattern. It just kind of provides more of those notes of the 12 beats. But when it emphasizes along with the bell pattern. So the shaker part mostly doubles and embellishes a little bit the bell pattern. But then when we get to the different drums, they're pretty off the bell pattern. So here's the first drum. So just be aware of these things. I'm not going to ask you, a detailed musical question other than, is this a bell? Is this a drum related to the bell? What's the meter? Let's go now to 1 minute 40 is the next one. And then the challenging thing is that the bell will start, I mean, the drum will start at a place that you didn't expect within that bell timeline pattern. So this is just a simple 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. It could fit right on that one and it's 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. But instead, because it starts at an odd place in the timeline, it sounds like very um, off balance. And then at 320, you hear all the different instruments. And this is an example of the core rhythmic concept here that we see in different ways in different African music. So here we see it in the percussion, interlocking parts. The different parts all have their own little rhythm. And then when they all combine together, they interlock into this more complicated rhythmic pattern, which is the agbekor. So interlocking parts, that's a key term. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Okay, so go through that track. Okay, so interlocking parts, also known as a polyrhythm. So in the notes, I explain that here. Interlocking parts, polyrhythm, and then the rest of the notes are mostly cut and paste. This deals with the meter that we talked about. Then you can have a little image from the book of the ensemble. Again, the bell, the gongkokwe is the only instrument you need to know. And then just this was really for my benefit, the different transcriptions, which is to say the musical notation of those different isolated sections. Okay, so we'll quickly listen to a little bit of the Agbekor track itself. So there's demonstration Agbekor, and then there's Agbekor, which is the actual ensemble playing. Um, you should just be aware that that's the Ewe West African Ghanaian drumming ensemble Agbekor. There are some aspects of it that we didn't go into much detail, like there are fast parts, there are slower parts. You can see those in the notes, but we didn't spend much time talking about it. Um, so just listen to the track and you'll see that in the notes there are the different listening guides. So you'll see that the marker goes to 240, but the track's longer, and then this next listening guide goes for the next section, and then there's a final listening guide. So the one thing you should be aware of with that is that the beginning of the track is a slow-paced section of the Agbekor. Then there's this free rhythm interlude, and then starting at 4:20 or 4:19 is a fast pace. So let's quickly listen to that. What you see in the video is a very fast-paced section, but let's hear beginning of the track, and then we'll cut to 4 minutes, 19 seconds, the fast-paced. So I'll just reiterate that. So most of the instruments are playing the interlocking parts, but those parts are pretty static. They just interlock. And then this big drum here improvises on top of it. So the times where you hear something added extra that wasn't in the basic pattern, that's the big drum improvising. Okay, and now cutting ahead to 4 minutes, 19 seconds to hear the fast section. 2 seconds, it'll start in 2 seconds. Long fade in. Okay, so listen to the track, follow along in these listening examples, which are in the notes for you, um, especially the fast and the slow section, which is the beginning and the fast section. So again, we hear this fast section in this video that we showed in class. That was a little slow section, sounded pretty similar to the audio recording in the book. And we're going to get to a very fast section here, and you can really hear the 12-beat meter pattern. And feel free to watch the video longer. It's almost 20 minutes long. You can see the dancing. It's at a funeral, so you can see an authentic social context for it. But that's basically it for the musical facts and testable material for the Agbekor. So we'll move on to the Mande people and the Kora. Okay, so the Mande people, we're going to focus on the Mande that live in Mali. This country, which was the primary site of the Malian Empire, which lasted from the 1200s to the 1600s. The Mande people consist of a number of subgroups with related but distinct languages, including Mandinka, Bambara. But I'm not going to require you to know those subtleties. We'll just refer to the Mande people. Um, Notable politically in its history compared to the other sub-Saharan African societies we're discussing because Mali was a full-fledged empire with an elite class that ruled, um, and that had important ramifications for the music. Also, their Muslim empire, and they had the Arabic script through the contact with Islamic peoples from North Africa. So Mande languages were written in Arabic script. However, oral history and oral traditions also played an important part in Mande culture. And the group of musicians that we're focused on were known as Jali, and they're also known as griots. A griot is a more general term, Griot, but the jali is the specific term that I want you to know, where these Jali was a musician, plays this special instrument we're about to talk about, but a singer and also a praise singer and oral historian. So the Jali would sing praises to the people sponsoring him at a particular event. Um, Also sing a bit about their own personal familial history, and then also recount the oral history of the group and the people. So they were the repositories of historical knowledge that they presented in singing as well as being entertainers. So that was an important social role in the hierarchical Mande society. And this Jali tradition was passed oftentimes from father to son. So it's sort of like a professional caste, a hereditary caste that is passed. And to this day, many of the musicians that play this sort of music have last names that indicate that they're a part of that musician ethnic caste that was passed hereditarily through certain family lineages. Okay, so talking about the instrument then, we're looking at this instrument, the kora, and we talked about it. There's other photos that you should look at that I'm not going to bring up now, but remember we mentioned that it's sort of like a lute, but it's also very much like a harp. It does have a neck, but the strings are not parallel to the neck. The strings run out, they come out into the space, so they're kind of perpendicular from the neck, and they're suspended by this long bridge. The bridge touches a membrane, so there is a resonating body like a lute has. Um, and that resonating body has an animal skin over it, sort of like a banjo. And then this bridge touches the animal skin, and the strings then are run in notches perpendicular to the resonating body. So not parallel with it like a lute would be, but perpendicular. Um, the strings come out, and you can see in this uh, video still here that the musician plays with either hand. So one set of either 10 or 11 strings. The instrument has a total of 21 strings. One hand plays 11 of the strings, one hand plays 10 of the strings, and then the musician can alternate because of the way the strings are set up. So each finger can pluck a different side of the strings, and they can do these quick runs of the instrument. So as far as the instrument itself, that means that it's somewhere between a lute and a harp. It's also known as a bridge harp because this bridge, which is this notched section that the strings are held in place that touches the membrane, that bridge is very prominent and an important feature of the the instrument's construction. Also, the bridge touches the membrane, so it's because of the bridge that the membrane and thus the resonating body vibrates. So it's kind of a lute, kind of a harp, also known as a bridge harp. But what it is the kora, Kora. That is the instrument that the Jali plays, and that's what we focused on. So I showed other videos as well, but here's one video of kora playing. So I'm going to let you take the time to go through these videos and the audio tracks. I will play a little of the audio tracks during this review, but the key things to be aware of, features of the instrument and the way to play it, like we just talked about. But then the key thing is that there's two different styles that this instrument plays in. Right now, this musician is playing in the long runs of the solo. So we will go up and down the scale in very fast runs of notes in descending or ascending melodic contours, and it's often improvised. And so that's when the instrument is soloing. There are names in my notes that I said you don't need to know, but you should be aware that the musical tradition has named these two different styles of playing. So there's this one, the long runs of notes. And then at other times, the instrument will play more in the musician will play more in an accompanying part in a sort of cyclical pattern, that repeats and is sort of a harmony that then they would probably sing over, or they may solo while playing that cyclical pattern. So the chord player can keep the cyclical pattern while also soloing sometimes. That's a possibility as well. So you'd either just completely solo, play the cyclical pattern, or do both at the same time. All right, so I'm going to cut to musical tracks, the recordings. The one that I'm going to start with is in the Terry Miller book. So let me go to that. So here, Jolly with Cora. I would recommend this one is nice because it's very clear the two distinct parts. And the other track is great too, but unfortunately, I just think the recording, I don't like the way that it's recorded. The voice is far too loud in the mix, so it's difficult to hear the Cora over the singing. But this track is better for that, especially there's also less singing. So let's start here with Jolly with Cora in the Terry Miller book. Here we immediately hear the long solo, and this goes on for quite a while in this track. That goes on for about 30, 35 seconds. You'll notice that the book labels it as the Birimintingo, which is the name for that part, which you don't need to know. Then we get to the part which is this cyclical kind of accompanying part. You can hear that it's in a meter, though I won't ask you which meter it is. It sounds like a 4-beat meter to me. So there's the cyclical part. And then 1 minute in, we hear the vocalist, the singer begin, who is probably also the kora player. The key feature of this singing, we said, was that the melodic contour of it, the way the melody goes, is usually very clearly descending. Okay, so that's an important thing to realize. Now, there's two different ways the singer would sing. There are melodies, like the song has a melody. These songs have been composed and they may write their own songs, but then there are also traditional songs that they would sing. The song has a melody. And then there are parts where the Jelly engages in the oral history or the praise singing. And in those more improvised sections of singing, you would hear this very fast, rapid singing in a very clear descending melodic contour. And this part is even more obviously descending. Juruba moila, korana juruba moila, sada darara juruba moila, dimbeda juruba moila, bulunda salada juruba moila. That was a clear descent, especially at the end. Let's listen a little bit to the track in Bruno Nettle's book. What's one valuable thing about this track is you can hear that oftentimes traditionally the jelly had some metal material, some rattling material that would buzz as they pluck the strings. So you get that buzzing timbre that we're going to especially see in our next example, which is very characteristic of many African timbre, the timbre of many African instruments. So you do hear that here. And then it's just that the voice is pretty loud and it overwhelms the kora playing. So here you hear the singer singing the melody of the song. So this doesn't have so much of a clear descending melodic contour. We switch to the other. So this is the listening example, the listening guide for this one in Bruno Nettle.
Sila jomage Wabe kare bai kumbai kono de baila Alai menge de
And then here we should hear a bit more declamatory style, meaning declaiming. Declamatory means to speak plainly. And so when we say that the chorus singer is singing in a declamatory style, it's almost like sung speech, not a melody that's supposed to sound beautifully sung, but more very direct speech. And that's the sort of style that they do the praise singing in the oral history in.
Galibangan na nilalangan na lumangkanya Daman
So there was a little example of it. Very syllabic, descending, quick phrases.
sa ulan ini daman sa ulan ba mukhe musa ni mukhe danduma taro kodo bulai bangida
So there it was, and you'll see here from 106 to 113, when it switches to that syllabic declamatory style, this is a chart for how what part the voice is doing. This is a chart for what part the core is doing. So you see the S, which means that it's this very descending declamatory style. And then at 116, we should get a chorus solo because that's listed as B for Biri Mintingo. So let's listen to that. It's coming up quickly. So there you do hear a solo, and the kora player is keeping the accompaniment part as well, the cyclical part, so doing both. So both the musical examples are good. You should be aware of them and be aware that the kora plays in two styles and that the singer sings oftentimes in this descending melodic contour. Okay, I think then we'll move on to the next example from Zimbabwe. Okay, so now we're talking about the Shona people of Zimbabwe. So Zimbabwe is in southern Africa, and the Shona people did not have a historic empire in the way that Mali did. Instead, it was an organization of groups with chiefs and local kings who would control a certain city or a smaller area, and then they were united through a common language and common cultural traditions. So this is characteristic of many other ethnic groups in sub-Saharan Africa, including the Ewe, where you have local leaders, but not some large kingdom or empire that really dominated a particular region. Um, the Shona are famous for a particular instrument. Let's start with this photo of it, the mbira. So it's a lamellophone, which is a type of idiophone with these prongs, metal prongs that are fastened through this um, rod that runs at the top of the instrument, and then the prongs go underneath it, and then you pluck them and they vibrate and they create the distinctive sound. Also, while I'm showing photos, the mbira is oftentimes played in this resonating gourd that can be detached from the mbira, but it amplifies the sound since it's often played outside. So here's a video example of the mbira. While I'm talking about the Shona and beginning with the cultural information, let me also mention that the mbira or instruments like it are at least 1,000 years old, so they're ancient instruments. They may very well go back further than that. So this is a case of a very ancient musical tradition. It's likely changed in many ways, um, but that's different than the kora, which we were just talking about, the Mande people, where the kora is about 300 or 400 years old. Okay, so back to the Imbira. Let's hear it a little bit more. You already can tell just from watching the video that it has a very cyclical pattern. So we're once again in cyclical patterns, meaning there's a cycle that's repeating. But as it repeats, there are variations. The other thing that you hear that you don't see too well, you can see it in this photo, is that there's bottle caps stapled to the bottom of the Imbira. And also there are bottle caps in the gourd resonating chamber. There are bottle caps on this video here in the Imbira in this video. They're just kind of blocked by the player's hand, but you can hear them. So the bottle caps create that buzzing timbre. So like the Cora, oftentimes there's a buzzing timbre because of some loose material, specifically stapled, loosely stapled bottle caps. So that's an interesting part and an important part of the instrument's timbre. Now, as far as our book examples, um, I already sent an announcement about this that you should pay attention. You should go back and read, but the Imbira specifically focus on the Nettle book. It's written, that section of the African chapter is written by a scholar who was a Zimbabwean specialist. So he has the best, most detailed presentation of the Mbira. So you see a lot of detail in this musical example, but the key basic feature, I'll let you go through the details, but there are a couple key features. One is that oftentimes more than one Mbira plays at the same time, and one Mbira plays a lead part, and then the other Mbira plays a following part. And again, there are two names for these parts, but you don't have to know the name. So you should just be aware that there's one Imbira playing and then another Bira closely follows it. It may play the exact same part, just off one beat, or it may play a completely different part that interlocks. So again, we do have interlocking patterns, but this time not drum patterns, but melodic Imbira patterns. The other aspect is that you hear this shaker. We'll talk about what the sort of rhythmic or metric phenomenon that the shaker and the Imbira create when they're combined, but we'll save that for a minute. So let's just listen to the track. First, you're hearing one prominent Imbira playing a lead part. So, FYI, this is not a term I'll test you, but when the book says basic ostinato, an ostinato is a repeating part. So, what I'm calling a cyclical pattern, another classic music term that's used in Western music as well for that cyclical pattern is an ostinato. So, I won't quiz you on that term, but when you see that in the book example, that's what that means. Cyclical pattern, a repeated pattern. And then in 5 seconds, we're going to get to the second section here, where there's a variation on that cyclical pattern. And then you're going to hear the following part, the second Imbira, more prominently as it plays notes that are the same, but just one note off. So it's like bum 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 bum. So it may be tough to follow the first time you hear it, but if you listen to that second 40 to 57 a few times, you will hear that there's a lead part and then another part following it closely. So pay a special attention to this Nettle example and go through it carefully. And you'll hear that basic feature, which is that there's a lead part, a following part. They play in a cyclical pattern. There's the buzzing timbre. As I said, the Imbira is a lamellophone. I'm just quickly going through the facts that you should know. There's the gourd resonator. The other key thing that you should be aware of is that the hosho, which is not a term you need to know, you just need to know the Imbira, but the shaker part is called a hosho, and that part is going. So it's kind of in a two, a duple, one, two, one, two. And then the Mbira is in a one, two, three, one, two, three, one, two, but often one and two and three and one and two and three and one and two and three and one and two and three. So it's playing a triple that then crosses over that duple. So you have one duple, one, two, one, two, one, two, three, one, two, three, one. The ones line up, but then you get this ba 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 ba, which is considered a cross meter because it's a triple meter over a duple meter. It's not like the 12 beat meter where it's 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 3, 4, 2, 3. It's a three over a two. I won't ask you to reproduce that, but try to see if you can listen to that in the track. You hear the Mbira in a three beat meter, the Hosho shaker in a two beat meter, but the ones always line up. So I'll just count it while we hear it. Shaker, one, two, one, two, one, two, one, two. And then Mbira. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so it's cool and it's very hypnotic. And then we talked about how the Mbira plays at these ceremonies, which happen to be known as biras, which are ceremonies where possession trance happens. Oftentimes, the trance is induced by a particular Mbira part. So some sort of memory of a particular piece of music causes people to go into the trance. And the specific context of trance in Shona culture is a particular ancestor would possess one person, and then that person, once they become possessed by that particular ancestor, they become the medium for that ancestor's appearance at ceremonies for life. So one person becomes the medium for one spirit, which is different than what we've been talking about in Caribbean possession trance, which we'll talk about later. I also showed this video, which I think is good. It just gives you a visual of what we've been hearing. So I'd recommend going to the list of video links and watching this one a little bit. Okay, so that's it for the Zimbabwean Shona Imbira section. We just have one more African section. Okay, so our final African example is the forest people of the Central African forests, also known derogatorily as the Pygmies because they tend to be short. Um, and the specific group that we talked about are the Ba'aka. And here you can see in the Titan reading, we have the Ba'aka. So I recommend looking at the Titan reading for this group. I don't have lecture notes on it, so you won't find them in the notes, but there's only a few basic facts to know about them. So you can just rely on this lecture. So the Ba'aka, they dwell in the forest. They're hunter-gatherers. Their way of life is threatened by neighboring groups who are farmers and have more developed societies. Um, they oftentimes gather, for instance, honey, which is one of the tracks that I played was from a honey gathering ritual. Um, though that was not one of a book track, so we're just going to stick to the book tracks now. Um, the key feature, they're also egalitarian, meaning that they don't have a social hierarchy. Everything, they live in small bands of people, so not a large tribal unit, like which would encompass the members of a city, for instance, maybe 1,000 or more people. These are groups of maybe 100 people. Um, Nomadic, living in the dense, thick forest, um, hunting for food, gathering fruits and vegetables and honey, and living in a communal egalitarian society. And then their music reflects that. So this is a case where the musical organization reflects the social organization. And the musical organization is this beautiful choral singing, which is polyphonic. So polyphonic means multiple voices at once. So there are different voice parts that, again, kind of interweave. Maybe interlock is too strong of a term here, but they interweave. There is a core melody that they would be aware of, but they're not necessarily singing the melody. And then everyone, as they see fit, sings a little embellishment, which adds to it. And it creates this net of different melodic parts interweaving in this polyphonic singing. So here's the video I played where you hear some of it.
I am fascinated by the complexity of the Baka polyphony. In a single song, a multitude of voices weave an extremely dense musical texture.
That's another key feature that we mentioned, that there's yodeling where you shift between a head resonance and a chest resonance. So you can find these facts in the Titan example here. The listening example is Makala, which I'll play a little bit of. But yeah, I'll just quickly go through the example. Be aware that they're the forest people. They live in the forest. They're nomadic hunter-gatherers. We can skip, I mean, this is valuable, but you can skip the part about the kind of stereotypical images of the forest and cut to the song. Timbre, this is an important section where they talk about both chest and head voices. So that's the yodeling. So this will mention the yodeling. And then here, singers do not, the theme is not often sung. That's the main melody. But then singers will sing this rich interwoven polyphony. They're free to improvise and add their own melodic features. And that's really all you need to know. And then the concept of polyphony here. So just reading a little bit of that will be sufficient. And I'll play a little of the track. So as the track says, you did hear the theme for about 4 seconds, starting at second 16, and then you start to hear this interweaving polyphony. And yes, there are a few people who are very close to the mic, so you hear their voices louder, but they're not the leaders of the song. That's the amazing thing about this culture. It's egalitarian. There isn't a leader of the song. They're all negotiating together musically. Um, and just to point out on the map, so the area where the forest people are found in different pockets throughout these dense forests in the southern Central African Republic and the Northern Democratic Republic of the Congo. So right in the center of Africa in the dense rainforests. So that's it for our Sub-Saharan African review. And stay tuned for my discussion of Caribbean music.